I wasn't supposed to hear it, but the words hit me like a hammer against glass. Standing at the edge of the hallway, my hands clutching the railing for balance, I froze as my daughter-in-law's voice sliced through the quiet of my home. The $1 million inheritance is ours. She's too old to spend it anyway. Ours. Not mine. Not hers. Ours. And then came Michael's voice. Soft. Hesitant, but unmistakably complicit. Just a few more weeks, Rebecca. Once Mom signs the papers, everything will be ours. I could feel the blood drain from my face. My knees threatened to buckle, but I gripped the railing tighter, forcing myself to breathe. The air smelled faintly of her perfume. Too sharp, too deliberate, and in that scent, I could taste betrayal. I am Mary Johnson, 66 years old, widow of a devoted husband, mother of 2. My son, Michael, once a boy with bright eyes and crooked grin, now seemed almost unrecognizable, soft-spoken, polite, but calculating. And then there's Rebecca, his wife, young, sharp, and undeniably ambitious. She smiles at me, but it's the kind of smile that measures what she can take, not what she can give. Sarah, my daughter, is the polar opposite. She chose a life far from this town, pursuing art, freedom, and integrity. She stayed distant, not from love, but from the suffocating grasp of greed and pretense that seemed to have crept into our family. Unlike Michael and Rebecca, she never tried to charm or manipulate. She simply was. I had spent years building a modest life, investing wisely after my husband's passing. Our savings and his life insurance amounted to a sum substantial enough to secure my later years. 1 million. I never flaunted it, never even imagined it would become a battleground. And yet here they were, plotting as though my life were a chessboard, and I the powerless pawn. For a brief moment, a wave of despair threatened to overwhelm me. I could confront them, scream, demand answers. But I realized then that anger would not serve me. To survive, to reclaim what was rightfully mine, I would need patience, observation, strategy. I backed away from the hallway, retreating to my study, my mind racing, every whispered plan, every veiled intent. Every shadowed glance would be noted, recorded, remembered, because they believed I was fragile. They believed I was helpless. And that, I decided, was their greatest mistake. For in that moment of betrayal, a quiet determination sparked within me. One that would not only reveal the truth, but reclaim my dignity. And so, the game began. Life had always been a careful balance of love, duty, and quiet optimism. After my husband passed 5 years ago, I thought I had learned to navigate it alone. I sold the small shop we'd built together, invested prudently, and set aside the life insurance payout, enough to live comfortably, enough to honor the life we had shared. I never boasted of wealth. It was a private sanctuary, not a treasure for others to covet. Michael had been my pride, and once, my constant companion. I remembered him as a boy, racing through the garden, cheeks flushed with laughter, promising to always protect me. But time, like water over stone, had smoothed the edges of that memory, leaving only a distant echo. And Rebecca, his wife, was a shadow that crept into my home, with careful charm, polite words, and an underlying air of calculation. She redecorated rooms without asking, suggested purchases I neither needed nor wanted, and always positioned herself as indispensable. I watched them carefully, noting subtle shifts in behavior. Michael, once warm and attentive, now flinched at personal contact, as if our bond were negotiable. He justified Rebecca's overreach with soothing tones. "Mom, we just want to make your life easier. You deserve comfort." Comfort, I realized, was her euphemism for control. Sarah, my daughter, contrasted sharply. She lived far away, pursuing art and a life unburdened by material desire. She called often, her voice filled with warmth and honesty. I envied her freedom and admired her integrity. Unlike Michael and Rebecca, she never sought to manipulate or impress. Her presence alone reminded me of a life less complicated, a heart untainted by greed. I started noticing subtle signs of scheming, documents misplaced, casual phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room, murmured phrases that vanished too quickly for me to confirm. I wanted to confront Michael, to demand answers, but the thought of betrayal from the one person I had trusted most was paralyzing. Still, the seed of suspicion had been planted. I began to record my observations meticulously. Every whispered conversation, every suspicious interaction, every gleam in Rebecca's eyes that spoke louder than words. With the guidance of Mr. Jenkins, our family lawyer, and Dr. Patel, my trusted physician, I began crafting a plan, not of revenge in the conventional sense, but of revelation. If I could remain patient, if I could let them reveal their true intentions, I could reclaim both my estate and my dignity. Every evening, I walked through my home slowly, touching surfaces that carried memories of love and laughter, noting what had been altered, removed, or claimed as theirs. The house, once a sanctuary, had become a theater of deception, and I, seemingly frail, was the unsuspected audience, waiting for the final act. And in the quiet of the night, I made a silent vow. I would not let their greed erase my life or my legacy. I would watch, I would record, and when the moment was right, I would confront them, not as a weak mother, but as a woman who had finally seen the truth. Because some betrayals, I realized, demand patience before justice can speak. For weeks, I became a careful actor in a play written by my own family. I shuffled slowly through the house, allowed my hands to tremble when lifting teacups, and sighed audibly, as though the weight of age had finally crushed me. Michael and Rebecca noticed every faltering step, every stuttered word, and smiled politely, believing they were in control. Rebecca's presence had grown increasingly invasive. She rearranged my bookshelves, critiqued my cooking, and suggested modern furniture that clashed with the home I had built with my husband. She flitted around the house like a bird, staking claim to a nest that wasn't hers. "Mom," she said one afternoon, touching my arm with a carefully rehearsed tenderness, "you don't need to worry about anything. Michael and I will make sure everything is perfect." Her words dripped with calculation. I let her think I was naive. Meanwhile, Michael had become almost mechanical in his interactions. Once, he lingered near my desk as I forgot where I'd placed important papers. He smiled, expecting me to be helpless. I did nothing. I let the lie settle. Late nights became my domain. I recorded conversations with hidden devices placed around the living room and dining area. Rebecca's voice, confident and sharp, plotting the sale of the house, and the quick transfer of my accounts, echoed through the recordings. Michael's complicity was undeniable. He spoke in hushed tones about moving the funds after Mom signs, and expressed relief that I appeared weak and dependent. Even during small gestures, a tray of tea, a polite conversation about the weather, I sensed their scheming eyes, calculating whether I would falter. And yet, I remained composed, my outward frailty masking a mind alert to every movement, every syllable. One evening, Dr. Patel visited under the pretense of a routine checkup. I confided my observations, outlining my plan to simulate my death temporarily. He listened, concern flickering in his eyes, but nodded. "Patience," he said softly, "will reveal the truth." My mind worked like a chessboard. Every step Michael and Rebecca took, I anticipated. I allowed them to overreach, encouraged them to feel invincible, and quietly collected evidence of every transgression. The culmination came one morning when Rebecca approached me with exaggerated concern. "Mom, Perhaps it's time to discuss the estate. It's just paperwork, really. You wouldn't want to complicate things for Michael, would you? Her words were syrupy, but my blood ran cold. I smiled faintly, pretending confusion. Oh, paperwork! I must have forgotten again. She left, convinced of my incompetence, unaware that I had already secured proof of their intentions. I sank into my armchair, fingers brushing over the recorder hidden beneath the table, heart pounding, not with fear, but anticipation, because soon, very soon, the moment would arrive when their overconfidence would betray them completely, and I would be ready, not as the weak mother they presumed me to be, but as the woman who had quietly watched every lie unfold. The game was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. The day of reckoning arrived with an eerie calm. I had vanished for 3 days, leaving behind a house that smelled of polished wood and stale anticipation. The news of my death had been delivered through Mr. Jenkins, my lawyer, and the reaction I had anticipated unfolded almost perfectly. Michael and Rebecca had arrived at the office that morning, dressed in mourning black, faces carefully composed, hands clasped, as though the act of grief might shield them from exposure. I watched from a hidden partition, heart steady, breathing slow. Every instinct screamed satisfaction. They had no idea I was alive, no idea how much I knew. Mr. Jenkins began the reading of the will, deliberate, his voice measured. I could almost feel their confidence radiating from the polished conference table. And then, the first recording played. Rebecca's sharp voice echoed. Once she's gone, we can sell everything. No delays, no obstacles. Michael followed, quietly muttering about transfers and bank procedures, the words confirming their betrayal. I stepped forward, revealing myself. The shock on their faces was instantaneous. Rebecca's mouth fell open, her carefully crafted composure cracking like porcelain. Michael froze, pale and speechless, his hands trembling against the table. "Mom!" Michael's voice faltered. "Not dead yet," I said, my voice soft but firm. For a long moment, they stared at me, as if the air itself had betrayed them. Then Rebecca's fury erupted. "This is illegal. You had no right." I held her gaze steadily. I had every right to protect my life, my home, and my dignity. You believed my frailty was weakness, and it was your greatest mistake. Mr. Jenkins guided them to sit, calmly replaying each recording. Rebecca's voice, sharp and ruthless, describing every scheme she had concocted. Michael's, complicit and cautious, echoing the betrayal I had feared since that hallway. Finally, the new will was revealed. Sarah, my estranged but unwavering daughter, was the sole beneficiary. The documents left Michael and Rebecca disinherited. Their hopes evaporated. Rebecca's scream was raw and guttural, a sound that seemed to scrape the walls of the office. Michael looked down, silence consuming him. "Mom," he started, but I interrupted gently. "Words are no longer enough. You both had trust, love, and opportunity, and you squandered it for greed." The room was heavy with the truth. The tables had turned. The predators had become prey to their own hubris. I had not only exposed them, but reclaimed what was mine. My autonomy, my legacy, my peace. And then quietly, I left the office, my head held high. Rebecca's rage burned behind me. Michael's eyes followed, haunted and empty. The confrontation was over, yet the weight of their choices lingered in the air, a testament to the consequences of betrayal. I walked into the sunlight outside, feeling the warmth on my face and the satisfaction of justice tempered with restraint. I was alive, I was whole, and for the first time in years, I felt free. The days that followed were quiet, almost surreal. I moved to a small cottage by the sea, far enough from the town to feel distance, close enough for Sarah to visit without effort. She didn't ask questions, nor did she need to. Her presence alone, steady, unpretentious, filled with warmth, was a reminder of what had always mattered: honesty, compassion, and integrity. Michael never called. Word traveled that Rebecca had left town in a fury, and that my son was left to grapple with the ruin of their ambitions. I imagined him pacing the house, replaying every whispered word, every small gesture he had taken for granted. Perhaps he felt shame, or perhaps just the emptiness of consequences he had refused to anticipate. Sarah and I spent afternoons walking along the cliffs, the wind tangling our hair and the salty air filling our lungs. We spoke of simple things: her art, my painting, books we loved, but always beneath the casual chatter, there was the quiet satisfaction of justice served. Not revenge, not spectacle, but the delicate restoration of balance that had been broken. The house, once the theater of betrayal, was now a memory I could hold without pain. The money, managed by Sarah, was irrelevant to me. The true inheritance was the understanding that dignity, self-respect, and patience often carry greater weight than gold. I still think of Michael from time to time, and the son I thought I knew. Betrayal had revealed the truth of his character, and it hurt. But it also liberated me. I was no longer tethered to illusions, no longer bound by expectation or disappointment. My life belonged to me, fully and unapologetically. Some evenings, I sit on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the horizon bleed into sunset. The silence is no longer heavy, it is healing. And when I whisper to myself, "We did it," I speak, not of triumph over them, but of the quiet victory of surviving betrayal, with grace intact. Greed may have tried to claim my family, but it failed. What remains is far more enduring: freedom, peace, and the knowledge that even in the darkest moments, clarity and courage can carve a path forward. And in that clarity, I finally understand. The most valuable inheritance a parent can leave is not wealth, but the unwavering example of strength, patience, and integrity, even when those we love falter.